This is Ray Mofield again. We have our oral history microphone, and we're in the middle of Scale, Kentucky. Most of you know where that great metropolis is in Marshall County. And today we're interviewing Luana Culp Story. It's very good to see you, and did we ask you your birthday?
No, I was born January the 18th, 1907.
1907. Well, good. That means you're old enough for me to talk to. You're 65. Okay? And I've heard through the grapevine that you have something in common with Abraham Lincoln. Is that right?
What would that be?
Well, you said you were born in a log cabin.
Yes, oh yes, born in a log cabin and lived there until I was almost 12 years old.
About what neighborhood was that in Scale?
No, that was out in
I'd say the white settlement.
about the other side of Brownsburg from here.
Mm-hmm.
Up east.
And your mother and father?
My mother was Blanche Culp. Blanche Walton Culp.
Uh-huh.
And my daddy was Amos Culp.
Amos Culp. Well, there are a lot of famous Culps. I know the one that I remember learning first was Red Culp, who played as a star on the 1938 Sharp State Champion basketball team.
I don't think we're any...
well, you may not be closely
no,
related, but I
so.
would assume that somewhere
Might
back
be.
in history.
Might be, yeah. And, yeah, we lived out there, and I went to White Oak School. And I remember all my teachers out there.
Well, if you do...
Ollie Colley was my first teacher,
Uh-huh.
and I'm not sure just which one was next, but I went to Dora Dyke, Dewey Colley, Frank Beasley, and Brent Hastings. They were my teachers that I had at White Oak.
Well, Mr. Brent Hastings
Uh-huh.
taught there.
And
He
then-
was in the room with my father at the long-term care for a number of years.
I don't recall who was next to my first one, but them was the ones I had at
Now,
White
this
Oak.
photograph you have here, are you on that picture?
I'm not really sure if I am. I thought at first I was, but I've decided that, now George Slaughter taught out there, and I about decided that that was the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is Mr. Sam Colley. He was the trustee. You know, back then, schools had trustees that got the teachers instead of a superintendent.
Every school was local, in
Had
other
a
words.
trustee, uh-huh.
And you
And he
elected
was
your
the
own
trustee, and I'm not sure if that's George Slaughter or Ollie Colley.
Mhm.
But I know several of them that's on there.
Well, that's good. Are there any people you could name from that photograph that
Yes,
might be known to some of our listeners?
Now, I believe that's Blanche Knowles.
Hobbs now.
Yeah, Hobbs. She lives up on Big Bear. And that's Floyd Chandler, used to be. She married Oscar English first, and then she married Walter Ruggles. That was Hayes Knowles. And that's Miss Alva Skillion. She was a Newton, you know, and she married a Skillion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my sister Flora. That's my brother Harlan. He's passed away. And that's my sister Meta. And of course, that's Myrtle Knowles. She married Raleigh Cox. And
I noticed some of those girls have ribbons in
Uh-huh.
their hair.
and I'm not sure of the rest of them. I know some of the rest of them. Now that, I believe that one is Kieran White. She was Nina McWar's sister.
Mm-hmm.
And Nina's daddy and my daddy were cousins. No, Nina and my daddy were cousins. Nina's daddy was my daddy's uncle.
Are you kin to Miss Davis? who lives-
Oh, I'm her sister.
Yeah.
This is Flora Culp Davis.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, you've done remarkably well. I'm not sure I could do anything like that on a school group.
And then when we moved to Brownsburg, my teacher there was Miss Robbie Wolf. And then I went to Walter Bloomingburg and to Miss Dewey Chandler, Collie again.
Mhm.
She had married the Chandler and was teaching up there again.
Well,
And I only got to go to half school half a year. I was going with Ernest Pfizer and Raleigh Pfizer in a car, and the roads got so bad between here and Benton that after Christmas they had to quit going in a car and went in a buggy. And that knocked me out of going to school anymore.
yeah. Now you were raised on a farm, I guess,
Oh, yes.
and did you have to get out and work in tobacco crops?
Yes, I did. And when I married, well, I met my husband in a strawberry patch, picking strawberries. And he went to Detroit and worked, that's in 1925, and come home in October, and we married and went back the next day to Detroit and stayed there 5 years.
Yes.
And come back, and we've been on a farm. Well, we went to Evansville and worked one winter.
Did he work in the automobile?
Yeah, he worked
Right.
at Briggs's,
Yeah.
and I worked in a medicine factory, Stearns's they called it.
Did you like Detroit?
Yes, I liked Detroit pretty good.
There are quite a number of Kentuckians there.
There
so
was lots of them there at that time.
you didn't feel like a stranger.
No. I liked Detroit pretty good.
Then you came back to Kentucky, and did you go back to a farm? Or?
Yeah, we come back to Kentucky and bought down below scale here a piece from Mr. Charlie Peck. We bought a place. And then we sold it and bought from Mr. Luce Burnham here at Scale. We've been here, moved here in 47.
And you've been here ever since?
Been here ever since.
Well, that's good.
And I've worked as a cook in different restaurants.
So you're the person that we need to go home with for dinner.
I got tired of cooking.
Yeah. I
But,
guess you just cook so much food it doesn't look desirable.
No,
anymore.
no, it doesn't. And but you was talking about the quilting. I like to quilt. I've got a quilt in the frames now.
You know, quilts bring a considerable amount of money today, don't they?
Yes, if you could sell them, but I've been giving most of mine away.
Well, you need to quit that.
Well, I've got children and grandchildren. I've got 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren.
Where do your children live?
Just below me here at Scale. I can.
So they're nearby, you
Oh
see
yes,
them.
they're right here at me.
And they have any children?
Yeah, I've got my daughter married Jerry Rose, Bonnie. She's got 2 boys, and my son Joe, he's got a boy and a girl, and they're all married except my youngest grandson, Bonnie's son.
So you get to enjoy
Yeah,
your family.
yeah,
That's the great part about having them nearby.
yeah, it is. But yeah, I enjoy them all.
Now, I can see why you give away some of those quilts because that means a lot to you.
Yes, it does.
But many people do sell them. And-
Yes,
and
I hear them selling them, but I haven't sold. Well, I did let Velma Jo take one to the hospital, and she would pay me when they were selling tickets for getting them electric beds over there. They
Uh-huh.
sold tickets on the quilt that I made.
Well, you've had quite a career in your own right, being in a restaurant and so on. And do you still have those frames with holes all up and down them? And
Yes, but I don't use them now. A man made me some horses that you put the frames on, and
my mother used to have 4 hooks up in the ceiling,
I used to have. Well, I still got them that you hang up in the ceiling.
and then you'd wind that up
Yeah.
at night,
Yeah.
get it out of the way, then let it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
Sometimes the neighbor women would come in,
And help you quilt.
and we were talking about swapping work with men on
Yeah.
a recent broadcast. So the women swapped work too, didn't
Oh yes, yeah. I had 2 good neighbors that would come in and help me quilt, and then we helped each other when we lived at the other place down there.
they? That's seemed to me would be terribly tiring work in quilting. You make so many stitches.
Yeah, you make a lot of stitches, but I enjoy it.
And with the neighbors there to talk to, it
Yeah,
made it
yeah.
even more enjoyable.
I
guess.
enjoy, yeah, we'd enjoy having our company with us and
Mhm.
quilting. And,
Well, you swapped work for hog killings too, I guess.
oh yes, we killed hogs, and we'd always swap and help each other.
Could you
and-
make some crackling bread?
My granddaughter brought me some cracklings, and I've been making crackling cornbread lately.
I still remember some my mother made and used to think it was awfully good. And of course you had to grind sausage.
Uh-huh,
I
grind
used
the
to
sausage.
turn the sausage mill.
And talking about killing hogs, I'll tell you, when my mother was a widow with 5 children, she always tried to have a hog to kill in the first cold spell. And we killed a hog one day, and that night somebody stole our meat
Oh,
from a woman with 5 children.
now that's heartless, I would
Yes,
say.
it is. And then I remember we had a big snow too. I remember that big snow we had in 1917.
Mm-hmm.
Come that big snow, and then it rained and froze on that, and we had a big hill behind our house, and we'd take tubs and boards and go and ride down that hill. And before the snow come, the men, always young men and boys, would come in and have a wood cutting for my mother, and she'd give them a play party. Well, it come that snow, and they didn't get to have their party, and we used up all the wood that they had cut up in stick length.
Mhm.
And my mother and my older sisters would bring the other in on the porch and cut it up, because the snow was so deep to get out, that they just brought it on the porch and cut it up. But we didn't worry about our eats, about going to the grocery like we do now, because we eat what we raised. Always had plenty of beans and potatoes and peas and sorghum molasses, and we just eat what we raised.
You grew the corn and took it to the mill and got the meal
And
made.
canned our fruit and dried apples and everything like that.
Did you ever pick blackberries?
Oh yes, we picked blackberries, and I remember once we had guineas, and me and my sister went to pick blackberries, and we saw these, thought they were little guineas, and we chased them down and caught them and carried them to the house, and my mother told us they were little partridges. So we had to take them back.
Well, I don't know how you ever caught them. You must have been like a deer in running. Well, I like to eat blackberry pie,
Yeah.
but I didn't like chiggers. Did chiggers bother you?
Not too much. No, they never did, and I never was bothered much with poison ivy. Never was with that. But,
Well, I never had that, although I've handled a lot of poison ivy, poison oak,
yeah.
so on. But I never did take it. However, I don't stretch my luck. I've heard you can be immune one year and then get
Take
to
it, yeah.
take it the next year.
Yeah.
So I don't try to rub it on myself at all. But for some reason, chiggers nearly killed me.
They never did bother me much. If they did, why, my mother rubbed bacon grease on them, and that would kill them.
Well, for me, they were always like the common cold. If you
Yeah.
didn't treat them, they got well in 2 weeks, and if you did treat them,
Yeah.
it was 14 days.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. In the fall, you could have a lot of fun by going nut hunting.
Oh yes, yeah.
Were there still chestnuts around when you?
I don't remember any chestnuts at all around.
Well, the Dutch elm chestnut disease killed most of them, I guess, in this country. But I can remember going to New Concord once down in Blood River Bottom when I was about 12 years old, I guess, and hunting chestnuts and finding them. I remember they had big burrs on them, sort of. But of course, there were always hickory nuts,
Oh, yes, yeah, well, we had liquor now. And we had a big woods lot around our house where we lived, and big pond, and of course I always made my playhouse around that big pond.
Mm-hmm.
One day I was trying to catch a tadpole and holding on to an old stump, and in the pond I went. It rotted off, and I went in the pond.
Yeah, that wasn't too funny. Yeah. Well, let's see. Did you catch any frogs and have frog legs?
No, never did. I never did eat any frog legs.
Now, you've had possum grapes, haven't you?
Oh yes, yeah. And I used to like them too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like grapes.
We'd go wild grape hunting. We called them possum grapes. There may have been different varieties, but to me they were all the same.
Yeah.
Now, what did some of them, the big ones, they call muscadines or something like that?
I believe so.
And in the spring, there was haws. I've eaten a few of those. And my great-great-grandmother used to have quince. Seemed like it came out fairly early in the spring. And there was service bushes. Now, she called them sarvices. Did you ever hear of
I
those?
never did. Yeah, I never did like services.
No.
No, they was a tree at Mr. McWar's house when we moved down there. They had service trees, but I never did like them. I did like services.
Well, when you were in school, did you have any sweethearts?
Yes, I had some, but they didn't seem to look at me too much, or I didn't think they did.
Well, at a young age, boys are not interested in
No.
girls, but when they grow up a little bit, they get interested. Where did you meet your husband?
We were picking strawberries from Mr. West Locker. And he lived here at Scale, and we lived over just this side of the 641 there. And met him in the strawberry patch, and we married in 25.
That sounds a little bit like Ruth in the Bible, doesn't it?
Yeah.
She was yielding. Is there anything amusing about the way he asked you for a date?
Well,
or
it's the
anything?
way I told. He was always considered kind of bashful. And somebody asked me, well, how did he ever propose to you? I told him, I said, well, he took me down to the Story Cemetery and asked me how I'd like to be buried there.
Oh, my. Now, that is one of a kind. That's a jewel. That's precious. I'm glad we got that on tape. I don't recall ever having heard that exact method before, but it worked.
Well, but I just made that up and told it, you know.
Yeah.
He didn't
He didn't really
He
do
didn't
that.
really do that, but he was considered kind of bashful, and they
Uh-huh.
wondered how he ever proposed to me.
Well, you've given us quite an outline of your life. Do you remember any of the games that you liked to play when you were growing up,
Well,
besides falling off the stump in the pond?
We, when neighbors would come, we'd play kick the can
Mhm.
and ante over. And I just liked to play any kind of games. It didn't make any difference what kind of game I played.
And Andy over, you took a ball and threw over the roof of the
uh-huh.
house, didn't you?
Yeah, and they caught it, and then they'd come around and try to hit you with it, I believe, or something
Yeah,
like
right.
that. And, yeah, they'd try to hit you with a ball.
And they'd play hopscotch and
Yeah, oh yeah, I liked hopscotch too. Well, any
jump the
kind of
rope.
game. Yeah, we liked to jump the rope. And
you know when it,
drop the
they
handkerchief.
get turning it real fast,
Fast.
and the kids would say, "Do you want some hot pepper?"
Yeah, that's right.
Then you'd have to jump till
Yeah.
finally you'd wear down, or
Yeah.
they'd get tired, one or the other. What do you remember about, let's say, the town of Benton, or
Well, I
Early
remember when
days.
that great big ditch come all the way from town down to the railroad, I think. Was a great big ditch there. And
I didn't hear of that for many of my interviews. Finally, Raleigh James Jackson, I think,
Yeah.
first told me about it. And since then, I've heard others mention it.
yeah, all there.
And it ran all the way to the NC in St. L.
Yeah. Hmm.
Oh, it's run all the way down there to
And-
down at the bottom.
And then they began to fill that in, and build up along there. Yeah, of course, when I was just a small child, I didn't go to Benton too much, but we always went to big singing, and all.
Now, big singing really hasn't changed much, has it? Except
The only thing is the crowd.
Yeah.
When I was going, that yard would be full. You couldn't hardly get around there. And most of them go now to hear the singing. My mother always went to sing.
Mhm.
And she'd cook a big dinner and we'd take. And, of course, had to go in the wagon for a while. And then she finally bought a hack, we called it, two-seated hack. We thought we had a car.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just up in the air then when we had a hack to go
Well,
in.
of course.
And
That was great. And do you remember anything about Tater Day back then?
well, when I was a child, women and children didn't go to Tater Day.
Just the men
Just
swap
the men,
dogs.
just the
horses.
men. And when I was married and in Detroit, the women and children got to go in while I was gone. But I never did go to too many Tater Days.
What were some of the stores that you recall trading at in the early
Well, I
years?
know Mr. Peterson's store was there, and McElrath, and
McElrath, Peterson,
and of course there was then later on Morgan and Heath, got in there. But way back then it was Peterson and McElrath and Ferguson. Ferguson
Uh-huh.
had a store.
yeah. Now, let's see, that Ferguson, was that where the National
Yeah,
store
that's
used to-
right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, the Heath store was on the corner where the dime store burned.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Hmm. Morgan and Heath, and then Morgan I think sold out to Mr. Heath. And then there used to be a theater there on the corner just across from where the dime store was. There was a theater there, and then later on there was one over there by Phil Benton Cans.
Now, that is Shelby McCallum's empire over
Was
there,
it?
wasn't it?
I didn't remember just
I
who
think
had
he
that.
came to Benton and managed the new theater then for Roughing Amusement, about 39.
Yeah.
I think I've heard him tell that.
Mhm.
And so it was in a little different place. Well, tell us something about remedies in the early days, medicines. Did your mother ever make you wear an asafoetida
No, I never did have to wear one of them. I've
bag?
heard
Did you
of-
ever smell that stuff?
I don't believe I ever did.
I have.
Well, I always.
I don't remember it.
I told my mother that you couldn't get sick with that because nobody get close enough to give you anything.
No, I never did. But she'd always rub her with Vic Save, her throats and all. We'd take Vic Save and castor oil, and that's about all.
My grandfather Edwards, now he was a turpentine man for some reason.
Yeah, I've taken turpentine and sugar for cough.
Uh-huh. He thought if you had a cough or sore throat,
Yeah.
why, he'd take some turpentine, put a little sugar in it.
Yeah, I've taken that too.
And that wasn't the best stuff in the world, but
But it would
anyway,
help.
yeah. And sometimes if you had stepped on a rusty nail, they'd get out the kerosene
Yeah.
can.
Hmm.
You ever do that?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. Take. Yeah. They put kerosene on your foot. Of course, we were always stepping on nails.
Do you remember when women first got the right to vote? 1920, I believe it was.
Yes, I remember that. But I don't think I started voting for a long time.
Right. What about some of the early officials that served the county or in this area? Do you remember any of, say, an early sheriff that
Uh,
was around?
well, let's see, Joe Darnell was sheriff once.
Joe Darnell, I've heard was
yeah,
sheriff, yes.
and I remember him. And I don't remember too many more, I don't believe. I mean, right now, I can't recall any right now.
What
Well,
about,
Jack Edwards, wasn't Jack Edwards the sheriff?
I
too?
believe he
Yeah,
was.
Jack Edwards was sheriff.
Pete Agnew.
And, yeah. And, but we had, and used to, you know, they would elect superintendents by the votes.
Mhm.
And I remember a lot of the superintendents we had back then.
I can remember Holland Rose, I guess, about as far back.
Well, was he elected by vote or just, I don't know. how
I
he-
can't tell you that. I'm not certain
I
whether he
don't-
was elected by vote or
no.
not. But one time there was a man named Peterson. wasn't
Harry Peters,
Peters.
Harry
yeah.
Peters, and there was a Jones feller, Charlie Jones was,
John A. Rand.
and John A. Rant. They were all superintendents back years ago. And I don't know when they quit electing them by vote.
Well, we've had the railroad taken up recently. How far did the train run from here? It wasn't terribly far, was it?
I don't know, but I went on the train to Paris, Tennessee to get married. And when we got on the train and gave him the ticket, he said, well, I guess you're coming back on the next train.
He recognized that you were going to get married, didn't he? How in the world could they tell that just by looking at you?
I don't know.
You
But,
know, those old conductors knew human nature pretty well, didn't they?
And then when we got off the train, there was this guy said, are you wanting to go to the courthouse? I reckon he knew, so it was a magistrate. We was married by a magistrate.
You thought you'd never be recognized by a soul, and they're the first man that saw you.
Said, we guess we're coming back on the next train.
Oh, that's really a humorous situation. Well, we got another minute or so. Do you think of any funny stories or something you'd like to tell before we...
No,
up
right
shop?
off. I can't think of anything that's happened that's too funny.
Well, it's been a wonderful interview, and I appreciate your allowing me to talk with you. And I'm going to always remember about do you want to be buried in the Story Cemetery. So that's one thing I don't think I'll forget. We've been talking to Luana Culp Story, and we're in Scale. We've enjoyed the broadcast and hope you have too. This is Ray Mofield. We return you now to our studios.